Hello again, everybody. This is Derek, and I'm coming back at you with another wargaming and miniature video. In today's video, we're going to continue on with our MeG boot camp. It's Mortem et Gloriam, which is a miniatures game set in the, what does it say, ancient and medieval era. Okay, in this video, we are going to be talking about Chapter 8. Chapter 8 is the turn sequence. It's called, the chapter is called Playing a Turn, but technically it's just explaining what happens in the turn sequence. Now this is a little different than what I normally do. I don't have the camera pointing straight down at the table with a bunch of miniatures, and we draw cards and roll dice and move the figures around in a visual manner so that you can see exactly what's going on. I decided that this video specifically would be better if I showed the quick reference sheet as I talked about each of the different topics. So what we'll do is I'll take my face off of here and we'll put the QRS up, and then we'll go over the chapter. All right, chapter 8 is the turn sequence. Chapter 8, Playing a Turn. Okay, this chapter contains a set of master rules to follow as you play the game. Okay, so basically you should have this turn sequence available to you as you play the game. Now there are only 6 steps in, and you can see right here we got the card phase. You should be able to see my little hand and arrows, my mouse pointer right there. You got the card phase, the charge phase, the shooting phase, we got the movement phase, fighting phase, and then end of turn phase, and then you repeat. So it's really not that many steps. And then in each phase is a number of steps that you may or may not use in that particular turn. So as we go through, we'll try to explain them all. The rules are designed to have a core process, the turn, and surrounding reference sections that contain everything you need to know at each stage. Okay, now remember, playing the game is actually chapter 8. Chapter 9. 9 has a lot of parts to it, a lot of sub-chapters. Think of it like this turn sequence where you have like the card phase and then you've got these sub-activities. Well, chapter 9 has 11 of them. One is command and generals, which we'll talk about. Formation. We're going to talk about all of these today, but not in detail. Only as an overarching, just so you can help you understand the turn sequence. Also, I want to point something out. This is the Magna and Maximus turn sequence. If you play Pacto, the numbers are going to be a little bit different, and distances are going to be different as well. 9.1 is command generals. 9.2, formations. 9.3, movement. 9.4, charge responses. 9.9, camps. Okay, I skipped. 9.5, combat, most important. 9.6, shooting, very important. 9.7, routes and pursuits. There's not really routes, but I'll get to that when we get there. 9.8 is cabs and recovering wounds. Okay, CAB is an abbreviation for kill a base. And then you have 9.9 is camps, 9.10 is flank marching and ambushes, and then 9.11 is unusual troop types. Now, after this video, we're going to be going into chapter 9 in the next video, but I am not going to be able to cover all 11 bullet points from chapter 9 in one video. So I'm going to break it down into bite-sized chunks, as you come to expect from my boot camps. All right, so it says, first thing you do is you follow the PBS in chapter 7. That's the pre-battle system, right? Set up the game, and then you follow these rules from chapter 8 on to actually play the game. Refer to them as needed. Refer to the relevant parts of chapter 9 for specific details, and you'll soon find that you don't need to refer to anything except the QRS, and not long after that, when you have used to the factors that matter to your army, you'll rarely need to use the QRS. Now, don't be daunted by the QRS. Remember, it has data for 3,000 years of history, so only a small subset of that data will apply to your army. I displayed the turn sequence on the screen so that you can follow along. Now, before we get started with the turn sequence, there's a few conventions that you need to know to understand. It says any item shown in bold italics. Okay, having a quick glance at the glossary, what they're talking about is anything that's in italics is actually in the glossary. Like where it says UGS, and then it says professional, and it says active player, army commander, gifting, that's all in the italics. I mean, it is in italics, of course, but that's in the glossary. We use bold when it is first used, and therefore switch to normal italics to be easier on the eye. Every mechanism is found in a section of its own in the next chapter. You will often find the headlines for a topic in this chapter, but these do not override the details of their own chapters. They are intended as a summary guide. So today is just a summary of these rules. The details of these rules will become evident when we go over those specific phases in the next few videos. Turns, phases, and sub-phases. The game is played by repeating the turn sequence shown on the QRS. Refer to this as you go through this section and as you play the game. 2. This sequence has been designed in a precise way. Following it resolves many apparent issues, so fall back on it when you reach a situation that looks complex. A turn is the entire sequence above. A phase is one of the 6 parts numbered 1 to 6. Card, shooting, etc. And a sub-phase is like these 3 right here, like discard, deal, and gift. In your first turn, you will be able to go from phase 1 to 4, but from turn 2, follow the full turn sequence. Yeah, because they're implying that there's not going to be any fighting in turn 1. But I would just go through all of it every turn, first turn, every turn. Okay, 5. Active player is the player with the pack of command cards, as this is passed over at the end of every turn. When the active player is done, you take the deck of cards and you pass it to your opponent. That passes the active status to them. If using command discs, the bag serves the same purpose, because it's a lot like bolt action where you draw dice out of a bag. In this case, you would be drawing colored discs. I think colored dice would work too. You would just have to have a ton of them. Okay. In any subphase, players take alternate goes. This creates a form of near simultaneous movement. More specifically, when it is your go, you can play a card to prompt an action, take a free action if one exists, discard a card, or pass. A better card than needed, either color or number, you'll see numbers on the cards, a higher numbered card, can always be used to prompt an action. So a green move means a green or better card. We simply refer to green to avoid repeating or better. Red, yellow, and green cards are referred to as colored cards. Black and white as non-colored cards. Well, isn't it black is the lack of all color and white is all colors? Okay, but either way, they referred to them as no colors. A subphase, okay, this is important. A subphase stops when both players pass consecutively. If you pass and your opponent does not, you may still make actions. However, if you pass twice, then you are finished and the opponent has free reign for the rest of that subphase, allowing them to do anything they can with their remaining cards. And it says, to show you have passed once, take a card from the discard pile and place it face down in front of you. Okay, that's kind of like overkill. I don't think you need to do that. You could just say, I pass, because your opponent's going to know. But I think the marker is more for like a tournament when people are very, when they're overly competitive and they might dispute whether you did 2 passes or 1 pass, that kind of stuff. The active player chooses the first actions in any subphase, and players alternate until all actions are completed and both players have passed. As a result, the active player chooses the first of his files to fight in each combat, which of his declared charges to move first, and which movement actions to do first, and so on. The other player then makes a choice, and so on. The invader is active first. That's in bold. The invader is active first. At times, you will agree that the order does not matter, and in that case, you can simply do things in any order. Melee combat with no shoves and no risk of either side breaking can be fought from left to right. Universal rules. These are rules that are going to apply to everything. And some of this we've already gone over, but it's just going to be a reminder. Army break point. An army is broken immediately if it loses half or more of its tugs. What that means is that your army is broken and the game then stops immediately. Number 2, tug breakpoint. A tug is broken immediately if it suffers a wound above half its bases, i.e., if a 6 base unit, it breaks on 3 bases lost and a wound, because you got to go over half your bases. Sug breakpoint. A SUG is broken immediately, and I keep saying immediately, and this time it's not underlined, and I'll explain why. If it suffers a wound above 1/3 its bases. So if it has 6, it breaks on 2 bases and a wound. Broken UGs in combat. A broken UG immediately stops fighting and does not roll any remaining combat. But the enemy may choose to fight those files if they so desire, possibly to try to kill a general or get a shove or shatter. Broken UGs in shooting. When broken in the shooting phase, broken UGs finish their shooting, as this is considered simultaneous. Because if you look on the turn sequence, if you get to shooting, it says simultaneous. So even though they're broken immediately, they do get to shoot back. Okay, end of game. When time is called on a game, it should finish at the end of the current phase. So, like if you're currently in movement and the game ends, it ends at the end of this phase, not the end of the turn. But that's very rare, and that's, on a friendly game, you'll probably play it out to the end or whatever. Specific location of generals. A general may have only one of 2 locations. Okay, it can be with a file, and therefore with the UG, or B, standing alone, and therefore not with an UG. So basically what they're saying is you're either attached or you're not attached. A general is displaced if contacted by UGs. So you just move them. If standing alone, then simply shift the minimum distance if contacted by friends, or get an immediate free move if contacted by the enemy. So basically you shift the minimum amount to get out of the way of your friends, but if the enemy moves a fighting unit where you are standing, then you just get a whole move to get away. Okay, if with an UG, then they go to the other side of the file first, if this is possible. So you might have an UG with a general attached to the back of them, right? And then the enemy might move behind your unit and move through an area where your general occupies space. So if with an UG, they go to the other side of the file first, if this is possible. So you move them to the other, a file is forward and backward, and ranks are left and right. So it would go to the other side, which would, like if he's in the back, he would go to the front. If that's not possible, then he'll move to the next nearest file, and so on, until space is found where they can be with a file. If no space exists, then treat them as with the original file they were with, and replace the model once space exists. Generals may only otherwise move position, even changing a file within a UG by playing a command card. To do so, or by moving with an UG while keeping position in the file they are in. So when you attach to a unit, let's say that unit is 2 files side by side. When you attach, you choose to be either on the right file or the left file. Okay, general movement. A general may move on their own or with an UG they are with, if it moves. They may move once in each of the charge phase and movement phase. They can therefore move to join an UG and have it change formation, or stop a forced charge. But they cannot join it and then charge with it. Okay, well, that kind of violates the and above, right? It says they can move and charge. And now it says they cannot join it and then charge with it. Okay, well, when we get to general movement we'll figure that out. Okay, 9. General's color upgrade. A general can upgrade a card once in each and every phase. That's pretty impressive. So all your cards are one better. To apply to a prompted action that they are involved in. So basically, if you're attacking with the general, you can up the card by 1. If you're moving, you can up the card by 1. If you're moving the unit with the general. They can use this to move themselves alone or to keep with a prompted action for an UG they're moving with. General card numbers. If a professional general is holding cards at the end of the turn greater than his card allowance, it may retain one more than its allowance to take into the next turn. That's a professional general. Here's a possibility of getting that. Let's say I have a general, it draws 2 cards. So it's allowed to have 2 cards at the end of the turn. And it draws 2 cards. But me, as a army general, I drew 5 cards. And I take one of my cards and I give it to that other general. And when it comes to end of turn, how many cards I can retain, he's going to be able to keep all 3 because if he's professional. If he's instinctive, he can't do that. Okay, formation when in combat. Troops in combat can be in any formation or layout that the movement of individual bases has created. When in combat, cards are used to move individual bases to where they are needed. MF1, MF2 actions are the only ones allowed when in combat. That's move, fight 1 or move, fight 2. In combat, other than a break off to get out of combat. And I will show you some of the actions here. Right there you can see the MF1, MF2. That's movement, fighting. Yeah, we'll get to that. Still as part of the universal rules. Legal formation otherwise. When out of combat, UGs must be a minimum of 2 files, that means side by side, and a maximum of 4 ranks, that's 4 deep, at all times, unless accepted by an army list or if you're playing Pacto. So a 6 base unit can be 2 across and 3 deep, or it can be 3 across and 2 deep. It could be 4 across and a couple of its files have 2 bases, or it could be a total of 6 across. Because the depth is a maximum and the width is a minimum. So you cannot be in march column. You can't put everybody in a single row, unless you're playing Pacto. Reforming. All UGs reform back into legal formation immediately they are free from a combat, and therefore before they pursue. Okay, I'm going to have to make a point about these rules. They are missing a lot of commas. They're also missing a lot of if-thens. Because when it says reforming, this is how I would read it. Okay, first of all, I'm going to read it exactly the way it is, and then I'm going to change it and read it the way I think it should be read. Reforming. All UGs reform back into legal formation immediately they are free from a combat, and therefore before they pursue. That was out of the book. This is what I think they meant. An UG reforms back into legal formation immediately when they are free from a combat, comma, and therefore, before they pursue. Let's not bash the editor. All right, so moving on. Prompted action per turn. Okay, a prompted action in general means it's a command. It's an order that you issue your troops. Those are prompted commands. Okay, prompted action per turn. An UG makes a single prompted action or charge per turn, with 4 exceptions. Being pushed or displaced does not count as an action, but a SUG being moved with a tug, it doesn't say that, does. A, B, C, and D. A. This is the 4 exceptions. As a many MF1 and MF2 actions may be done as cards allow. They can do F1 to F4 actions after having charged earlier. Those are fighting actions, right? They can move after doing a C3 to stop a forced charge. A C3, I think, is a charge action. After a skirmish or runaway, UGs can do a limited M2, M9, or M10 action CQRS. Okay, we'll get into that. A lot of that I don't understand. Hopefully a lot of this will be revealed as we go through the tutorial. Universal half base shift. All moves, prompted and outcomes, may always include a 1/2 base width shift. Point of issue. I've decided to stop reading and I'm now translating. All moves may always include a 1/2 base width shift. 2. A. Move around friends. Or B. Align or join 2 friends to make a block or supporting file. Move around terrain. So there's like a lake and you need to make a little half base shift. You can do that. B, to avoid the table edge. I'm sorry, that's D. E, avoid non-charging enemy if doing a break-off, runaway, or skirmish. So like if I'm breaking off and I need to make a little half base shift so that I don't contact the enemy, yeah, you can do that. Okay. Next thing, displacing friendly SUGs. At any time, a tug, and remember, tugs are your tactical main battle units, and SUGs are just skirmish units. At any time, a tug may displace a friendly SUG up to 1 base width out of the way to make room for any movement of any kind. As long as there is room to do so, the SUG doesn't thereby come in range of enemy it currently could not shoot at. So you can't be in a position your friendly SUG or tug can't move up to where you're at, and so you get that free 1 base move and you advance a base width, and now you're in range. So they can't like push you along like that. In that case, the SUG cannot be displaced, so the tug would have to stay back. Pushing enemy SUGs. The movement of your tugs cannot be blocked by enemy SUGs except in terrain. In the movement phase, your tugs push them back with their first movement. Only a second movement of an M14 double move is stopped. And it gives rules to reference when working that out. You got 4 more. Passing through friendly foot sugs. All troops may pass through friendly foot sugs in any direction, and vice versa, except when charging, including counter charges or intercepts. So sugs, think of them kind of like transparent. You can like move through them whenever you need to. You just can't blow through them with a charge. Next one, wheeling when charging. All charges may have a wheel up to 90 degrees. I think that's a lot. That might be too much. At the beginning of the charge, but may not pass through any friends unless making a forced charge, and the wheel is limited by the presence of any enemy, including sugs, at the time of the charge. Enemy sugs, prepared to come close, therefore do get the attention of enemy and limit their potential to wheel as part of the charge, but with a commensurate risk for doing so. Okay, so I haven't figured it out yet, but if it's anything like Napoleon's Battles or some of these other games, yeah, even Hail Caesar, I do believe, if you're within a certain forward arc of a skirmish unit, you can't wheel or pivot. Okay, so we'll get into that when we get to those rules. It says charging files when an UG is in combat. So it is possible to have a very wide UG and only part of it is contacting the enemy and the other files are not contacting the enemy, and you can still charge with those files. It says, if an already engaged in combat, an UG may charge with any of its files that are not engaged frontally at any target that is within 1 base width, and may be subject to forced charges. There's some units that might, like berserkers, I would think, might have to charge. Okay, last point of the universals. Prompting through fire. Slowing effects of fire on an UG or a block of UGs can be reduced or even removed entirely by prompted through fire, whatever the case of slowing. Okay, so I don't know what that means, prompted through fire. It sounds like a general maybe can overcome the base width reduction by paying extra cards. I'm guessing. I don't know. Let's get there. Okay, the card phase. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the phases, and this is the point of this video, is the phases. Players place any cards they have kept from the previous turn next to their on-table generals. Professional generals may hold one more than their allowance. We already talked about that. But they receive no new cards as already above the normal amount. Okay, so that is just basically saying if you are allowed to have 2 cards and you are professional and you already have that 1 extra card, you don't get to fill your hand because you're technically already at the maximum. The active player shuffles the pack, putting back any discards from the previous turns. Remember, the active player is the one with the card deck in their possession. And the card deck passes back and forth, denoting who the active player is. The active player shuffles the pack and deals cards to each general back up to their allowance. 2, 3, 4, or 5. Cards should be dealt to each general in a circulating fashion, like when you're dealing poker. 1, 1, 1, 1, 2, 2, 2, 2, 3, 3, 3, 3, etc. So, like in a circle. Where discs are used, it is best for the non-active player to draw first and let the active player draw second and keep the bag. I'll be using cards. I just feel like cards are a way better system. Because I feel that those tokens, those chits, they'll get worn out over time. So will probably the cards, but I could probably put, I haven't thought about this, but I could probably put them in card sleeves and prevent them from getting worn out. SP2. Okay, so that is, what does it say on the turn sequence? Discard cards as desired, active player takes pack and shuffles all discarded cards. Okay, deal the cards. Cards are dealt face up for flank march generals. So if you've got a general that's performing a flank march, you deal those cards face up. Deal any flank march cards face up. Okay. So on the first turn, allied generals get their cards face up. And then you continue to deal allied cards face up if they are hesitant. Red cards are needed for flank marchers to arrive or to recover from being hesitant. So you're going to keep dealing face-up cards to the allied general until you get a red card, and then he's not hesitant anymore. All white and or black cards, which is basically your non-colored cards, cause allies to be hesitant. All black cards cause desertion. Okay, and then it says professional army commanders can gift cards, that's 1.3, to professional non-allied subgenerals. If floating, any number of cards may be gifted to any such general within 15 base widths. All right, as you can see at the very bottom, I put the generals there. It says professional army commanders can gift cards to professional non-allied subgenerals. Non-allied is meaning your own personal army generals, your internal generals. They're not the stranger. They're not the allied general. If floating, any number of cards can be gifted. This is a professional general, and then you got floating army here, and then controlling. So if you are in command, like you're attached to a unit, you have a 10 base width command range, where if you're floating, flying around independently, you have a 15 base width command range. If leading a command, then a single card may be given inside 10. So this one says it can gift one command card, and this can give any number of command cards. Okay, now you are about to start making prompted actions using the colored command cards. Okay, so you're about to start making prompted actions using the colored command cards. So the reference has been pulled up. Okay, charge phase. A friendly SUG must be moved out of the way, but only to allow friendly UGs to charge using a C1 prompted action. Move SUGs to allow for a charge. The move must be a white move from the SUG's column. Okay, so this UG here is allowed to use the C1 action, and you'll only need a white card to do it, which is one of the lowest cards. So a white card can move a SUG, but you cannot use this unless the move is making room to allow for another unit to attack, to charge. Forced chargers burst through unengaged friendly bases to get to their target, and cause a cab test on any tugs they burst through. Or B, destroy any SUGs they burst through. So you don't want to have your SUG in the way of a charge, because if they burst through them, they're immediately destroyed. Or B, destroy any SUGs burst through. Otherwise, the SUGs do not make space for the charge. Then the charge is blocked, and stops when it reaches the SUG if it's in the way. So you don't have to burst through your SUG. You can opt to stop and not kill your SUG. SP2. You can see it there. Yeah, alternately charge phase. Move SUGs, generals, declare charges, 2-2. So alternately, that's because active player first, then alternate. Declare or hold any charges. Place a charge marker with each UG as you declare it to show the direction of the charge, but do not move any bases. So it just says mark the charges. So I mark one, you mark one, I mark one, you mark one, etc. As part of that, you're going to shoot at any troops using the shoot and charge immediately when you declare the charge. So shoot with any troops using shoot and charge. Shoot and charge is a special ability. Charges may be a single UG or a block charge. There are 3 types of charges: forced, free, and prompted. Forced charges can be declared for free but require cards to hold them. That's stop forced charges. So if you have a forced charge, you got to play a card to prevent it. Now remember, your tug is either going to be drilled, formed, or tribal. So a drilled is a lot easier than a tribal because that takes a red card to stop them from charging. Free charges can be declared without spending a card. Prompted charges can be paid for and are all green. So prompt charge, it's green. All charges are now marked and no bases have been moved. So as you mark, I assume you would pay the card cost to place the charge marker. Mark any remaining force charges that have not been held. You have passed the opportunity to hold them, and you could still choose your direction of charge. So if you got something that has a forced charge, you can still direct it. You just can't stop them. The next step, that was forced charges, counters. Alternately, that means back and forth. Prompt and move any counter charges and interceptors and move these UGs into positions to try to get in the way of enemy chargers. Such moves cannot start or go within one base width of the chargers they are responding to. You're a little bit off to the right. I'm charging this unit directly to my front. You countercharge with the unit to my right, and you try to get in between me and the unit I'm charging so that I would be forced to run into you. But you still can't get within one base width of me. Or you can't start within one base width of the charger. Intercepts may only go directly ahead, and countercharges may wheel towards the enemy chargers and may not end further away from them than before moving. So you can't use a countercharge to reposition your unit somewhere else on the battlefield. You still have to try to get closer to the enemy, because that's kind of like you're trying to abuse the rules. Carry out any runaway or skirmish moves. Okay, this is a big section. Carry out runaway or skirmish moves and carry out all shooting at chargers, counterchargers, or interceptors who come within one base width of the shooter. Okay, from those doing runaway or skirmish and those standing to receive, and any others where they come within one base width. And then breaking it down even further, it says the owning player choose whether to run away, skirmish, or stand, depending on the options allowed. In general, SUGs and cavalry, and chariots who are missile focused can run away or skirmish, and other non-SUGs stand to receive their, but check, there might be exceptions. Okay. Shoot at chargers using the normal shooting mechanism, shooting with all files, whether being charged or not, where the charger's path of the charge comes within one base width. A path of charge is stopped by enemy standing to receive, but continues beyond those doing a skirmish or runaway. Okay, so what that's saying is if I'm doing a skirmish, I'm 2 base widths away from you, and you charge me, I'm going to move my skirmishers out of the way, but you don't have to stop at the 2 base widths. You can keep going, trying to catch me. A single file may only shoot once, and if there are multiple potential targets, it must shoot at the charging base that first comes within 1 base width. All shooting at chargers is considered to be at 1 base width range for all the factors and target priority and stuff like that. So if I've got 2 units charging and I move the unit on the left, you have to shoot everybody that can shoot at it. And then I move the unit on the right. And if any of those units would have been able to shoot at it, you now cannot. You've already shot at the unit on the left. Note any slowing effects by placing a marker. Move all UGs doing runaway or skirmish moves. Roll a variable movement dice using the table in the QRS. That's over here on the right where it's roll a d6 with modifiers, and you reduce the base width or they add to their base width. If making a runaway, you end up facing away from the enemy. If making a skirmish move, you end up facing towards the enemy. A skirmish move can be used when charged from flank or rear. Your shooting is deemed ineffective as the target is not ahead of you, but at least you turn and move. Generals can prompt through fire complete charge moves. Okay, because now we're at shoot chargers, now we're at move chargers. Move with slowing effects of fire, prompting through fire, remove SUGs hit by tugs. Move your chargers starting with the active player if the order matters. As a result, if the UG is charged to the flank or rear, but is itself charging, it might get away by outrunning its attempt the first move. Okay. Charging troops keep in the direction of charge except where the target is moved for any reason. Generals within 2 base widths can prompt through fire to get back movement distance lost from shooting. You get 1 base width back with a yellow, 2 with a red. And general upgrades may be used if not already used. Once contact has been made, press forward up to 1 base width with any file that can thereby contact an enemy. And if newly contacted UGs would or could run away or skirmish, they may do so, but without firing. Basically, they got caught by SUGs that are caught by tugs in good going are broken immediately and removed from the table, unless the tug is within 1 base of breaking, such that the SUG could charge them. The tugs charge, then continue its full distance. It sounds like if I charge and I make contact with a SUG, but my tug is damaged to the point where it might break very soon, then the SUG is not immediately destroyed. And also, if the SUG is in the swamps, in some woods or something like that, they also are not immediately broken because they're not in the open. Align, active player has the first option. if desired, and fight charge combat. So you make the alignment if you want. There's an example in the book, which when we get to combat, I'm sure I'm going to touch on it. But there's an example in the book where if your unit is contacting an enemy in the flank, but one of your bases is in the front, right? Because it comes at an angle, and you go to align, you align to the base that's in the front. So you wind up losing the advantage of striking the enemy in the flank. So you would probably not align. You can't choose to align to the flank. So you would leave them out of position. And then the defender at that point can choose to align. And then after you decline or accept to align, at that point, the defender chooses to align or decline. And there are alignment rules, which we're not going over right now. We'll do that when we go over that chapter. Before charge combat, any UGs may shift to align with the enemy. No front corner of a front base may move more than one base width. So rear bases simply follow. Alignment is not compulsory, but often creates a useful tidy effect. The active player has the first choice to do that. Now roll for charge. Okay. Fight charge combat using the combat mechanism. Each interconnected set of SUGs fighting in a single combat. The active player chooses the first combat. Fully complete this before moving on to another. The inactive player chooses the next combat, and so on. Within each combat, the active player chooses the first of his files to fight, with the inactive player then choosing one of theirs, and so on until all fights are completed. Many times, this ordering does not matter, and players can agree to roll them from left to right. A file next to a shatter or shove, if one exists, must be chosen ahead of any other file. So what they're saying is, if I contact you 3 files in the front against your 3 files on your side, let's just say everything's perfectly lined up, and I decide to attack from left to right, and I hit you, and I successfully shove or shatter the left file, but you as the alternating player would prefer to use the far right file because that's where your elite units are, you can't, because I've already shoved the far left, so now you have to choose the middle, which is an adjacent file. Use a marker such as the red shatter shove marker to note a shatter or shove has occurred. Remember that supporting files do not count in charge combat at all. It is representing the first 20 seconds of contact and those immediately facing each other. Okay, so what they're saying there is, let's say you've got 3 files and I have 2 files, and I hit your right 2 files. Your far left file, because it's not directly aligned with a unit, doesn't fight. It doesn't support, it doesn't do anything. Only my 2 files and your 2 files that initially made contact fight. But this is only the first 20 seconds of the contact. After that, it'll go to the fight. Because if you look here, we're in the charge phase. There's also a fighting phase down here. But right here, we're in charge combat. That's like that first 20, that's that impact smack. Take any immediate cab tests, such as for a dead general. So that was the initial wham. Okay, now it talks about casual. Casualties are removed according to the detailed rules. If casualties from a file exceed bases, further bases are removed from an adjacent file. So if I've got a phalanx with 3 base depth, but for some reason that file just lost 4 bases, then the 4th base would have to be taken from an adjacent file. Even though that's never going to happen until you're down to like 1 base. Further bases are removed from an adjacent file. The owner chooses which. A base cannot be removed from this result if an UG losing... A base cannot be removed if this results in an UG losing contact entirely with an UG it is fighting, unless there are no other bases that can be removed. So you can't remove an adjacent base in an attempt to break contact with the enemy. You have to take it from the other side. If an entire file is destroyed, any troops fighting their flank, the victors can press up to 1 base width into contact with other enemy bases directly ahead. So what they're saying there, I believe, is once the bases have been removed, if there's a hole, I can move a base width down the line like rolling up the flank. And then last point, outcomes. Make any end of phase kill a base test for broken tugs to kill generals with a broken UG, etc., as per the cab table. Note that there can be as many cabs as there are causes on an UG. So if a general is killed in a rout, this will itself cause more cab tests, and so on. So because a rout causes cab tests, and then the loss of a general causes cab tests. So you can get multiple cab tests. Move routes. I don't think it talks about that. Yeah, okay. It just says cab tests, routes, burst throughs, and pursuits. Okay, so move routes. Roll the variable movement dice on the table that I showed you earlier, right? Routes can only shift 1/2 base width to avoid things as per the universal half base width shift. If routers meet an enemy, they are removed. If they meet friends, they must burst through them, causing cabs. Unless either the router or those being burst through is a foot sug. Routers move directly away from their opponents, those fighting or shooting. UGs broken while fighting to 2 front, flank, rear are destroyed where they stand and removed. So if you're hit on 2 sides, you don't rout, you just get destroyed. They do not make a rout move. Otherwise, the owning player chooses which direction to rout them. If there is more than one such enemy, wheeling or turning to get into the right direction. Okay, so you move your router based on your variable movement, and you try to avoid friends using the half base movement. Okay. Play cards to hold pursuers. Where desired and allowed to do so, make a pursuit with any other UGs who were in front edge contact with an enemy router, unless they have other enemy who have their front edge in contact. Because when you charge, you can actually strike 2 units. And then if you rout one of them, you can't move because the second unit is actually holding you in place. Pursuers wheel to try to catch a routed enemy. UGs that destroyed enemy where they stand may still choose to pursue. They just go directly ahead. They burst through the enemy. And here's the catcher. At the end, you wind up removing the routers anyway. So at the end of the charge phase, if anybody is routing, you just pick them up off the table. There's no chance to rally them or bring them back or anything like that. Remove all routers from the table. So basically you want your units to be destroyed where they stand. That way you don't accidentally burst through some of your friends to the rear. Okay, if pursuers have hit new enemy, they fight charge combat against them now. So basically you charge forward, you hit a unit, you cause them to rout, you pursue them, you hit another enemy unit, it's considered a new charge, you fight them. Shooting phase. Now we're in phase 3. Both sides shoot any and all files that did not shoot in the charge phase. So you don't get a second shot, right? Files that did not charge or shoot in charge phase. Using the shooting mechanism. Remove any casualties, taking the nearest base to the shooters if firing en masse. Mark any slow fire effects. Shooting outcome. Carry out any cab tests, such as a result of a broken UG. Any broken UGs make a route move directly away from any troops shooting at it in this sub-phase. Any UGs in combat. Okay, so let's say I've got a unit of 2 bases, and if you kill 1 base and a wound, there would be 1 base remaining, but it's broken, so it would rout. And so it would roll on its variable movement, it would rout, it would cause any burst throughs or cab tests as it routes. And if there are any UGs still in combat with that UG, they would now get a pursuit move. Okay, so without going any further, that implies you can shoot into combat. And then as soon as that phase is over, you remove routers. So a router, it sounds like, doesn't survive the phase. Once they route back, once you break a unit, it is gone. It routes and blows up. Okay, that was quick and easy. Let's go to movement phase. Either side may align, starting with the active player, active as previous. Align troops in combat if desired. Active player has the option, then inactive. Any professional general in the previous turn, any professional general killed in the previous turn is replaced. Place the general base currently with the camp. So you place it all the way to the rear wherever your camp is at. Okay, this should have a comma and a question mark and an or something, and I'm sorry I wasn't translating. Let's read that again. Any professional general killed in the previous turn is replaced at this stage by a subordinate. Place the general base currently with the camp with one of the remaining UGs in the command. If no UGs in the command remain, no new general appears. So I'm getting that I'm going to have to get a verification in the actual rules, but it says place the general base currently with the camp with one of the remaining UGs in the command. Okay, so I guess what they're saying is the general is coming out of the camp, running over to the UG and taking command. I thought it might be place it with the camp or one of the UG. I guess it could be just place it with one of the UGs. Okay, we'll get a verification on that later in a future movement video. Prompted moves. Movement starting with the active player. Either play a card to make a prompted action allowed in the movement phase on the prompted action table, right? One of these, if you got the right card. Discard a card. I don't say that, but it is discard a card or pass. Continue with the inactive, then the active, and so on until both sides pass. Remember to take off any movement distance for any slowing effect of fire and recover using cards to prompt through fire if desired. All right, and I just wanted to kind of show you over here on the right different types of units and what they're, if you're going through good going, how many base widths they would be moving. It looks like 6 if it's skirmish cavalry, but if you are close infantry, like Macedonian pikemen, you're only moving 3 base widths. Okay, fighting phase. Active player first, then alternate. Either side may align starting with the active player. Then you fight melee. The active player chooses the order as previous in charge. Fight each combat to completion in turn using the combat mechanism. Remember that supporting files fight now, given additional dice in melee to neighboring files, as melee combat represents the several minutes of open fighting after the initial contact. Remember shove effects and others that apply, such as melee expert, but remember that shatter does not apply in melee combat. Shatter is a charged thing. Melee combat outcomes. Cab tests for broken tugs and generals with any broken UGs. Make your route moves, make pursuit moves, and then control them with F1 actions if desired. F1, down here, fighting. Control pursuit. So if you've got tribal, you can't control their pursuit. But if you want to try controlling a pursuit, you can. Breakoffs. Make any F2, F3, or F4 breakoff moves and roll associated cab tests for dangerous versions. Okay, so break off cab, cavalry, chariot from slower foot. Much easier. It's green and yellow. And then break off everything from a slower enemy. Still can do it, but you have cab tests. And then break off from equal speed. It becomes harder. They can't do it, but it becomes harder, and there's a cab test. Looks like drilled is obviously it's always the best. Post combat actions. Those are breakoffs, moves while in combat, M1, M2. Starting with the active player, alternately prompt post combat MF1 and MF2 actions only with remaining cards. Okay, MF1, MF2. MF1, move unengaged bases to a different file. So you can shift your back rank bases over. Okay, and then MF2, it is what turn bases 90 degrees or 100 degrees to face the enemy in combat. Create supporting files, fill gaps, create ranks, fight enemy supporting files, multiple actions allowed. Okay, end phase. We're all the way down to end of turn phase. Recover wounds with generals within 4 base widths. Okay, so you've got units that have taken wounds. It doesn't necessarily, think of this as kind of like a rally. It doesn't necessarily represent people are dead, but it does mean that they're not in formation fighting with their unit. So a red, okay, does it say? Oh, it does. Generals within 4 base width. Red if they're in combat. A yellow if they're not in combat. And then, what does it say over here? Remove wounds. Take any slow markers off the table. Okay, it says a general's upgrade for the phase may be used if they are with the UG. Remove any remaining slow markers. Any instinctive general killed in the previous turn is replaced at this stage as a subordinate. So professionals got replaced up here, instinctive get replaced down here. Place the general model that is currently with the camp with any remaining UGs in the command. Okay, that kind of clarified a little bit more. Like when the general died, I just picked him up and moved him back to the camp. That as a marker. I think that's good. If there are no UGs in his command, No new general appears. Carry out cab tests for any sacked camp. Any camp broken in the charge combat or melee combat of this turn. If your camp is sacked, the enemy gets a cab test against every on-table UG in your entire army, and 2 rolls against any UG with over 8 bases. Remember that any S slow result from these carry forward into the next turn. Both players discard any remaining cards as desired, and the active player passes the disc or deck to his opponent, who now becomes active. Okay, that was quite a bit. But to summarize, I'm going to close the book. I'm going to summarize. To summarize, if I can just visualize this with me. I've got a deck of cards. I'm the active player. We all discard cards as desired. If it's the first turn, nobody has any cards. You deal the cards out based on the quality of each of the generals, 2, 3, 4, or 5 cards, including dead generals. I guess that's because the general is at camp and he's still getting cards because he's going to join the battle later in the turn. If you have an allied general, you play his card face up to see if he's hesitant or if he's recovered from being hesitant. You play cards for flank marching as well to see if they enter the table. They enter a table on a red card. You can gift cards with your professional generals within 15 base widths or 10 base widths. Professional generals can retain 1 more card than they're allowed. They don't have to discard. They don't have to. They can. Active player, then you go to the charge phase. The active player declares his charges. Active player moves SUGs and generals with a white move to get out of the way of your charges. I'm looking over here. Generals move as skirmish infantry. Okay. So they move 4. That's not very big. I was thinking they would move like 10 or 20. But okay, they move 4. Or they move with an UG they are with. So if they're with skirmish cavalry, they'll move 6. But if they're not, they move as skirmish infantry 4. Okay, interesting. Okay, so you move your SUGs with a white or better. You declare all your charges, which I think those two pretty much happen simultaneously. And once all, and you go back and forth. Just because I'm the active player doesn't mean you don't get to prompt and charge. We both get to prompt and charge. So I declare, because the active player just does it first. So I declare my charge, you declare a charge, I declare a charge, you declare a charge, playing the cards to prompt these charges. Then you, if you have a forced charge, you could try to stop it by using cards to stop forced charges. You can countercharge, and then you can shoot chargers. So if I have any units that can skirmish or run away, they can shoot and then run away. They are considered shooting at 1 base width, and then they fall back using the variable movement. And then I continue to move my charges now with the new slowing effects, because slowing effects can slow you 1, 2, or 3 base widths. Prompt through fire. Here it is. Generals with 2 base widths prompting through fire yellow, and 1 base width. Generals within 2 base widths prompt through fire yellow. 1 base width recovered and 2 base widths recovered. So yellow or red. Okay, so we prompt through fire, we move our chargers. Now charge combat. Either side may align, starting with the active player. You fight the combat. Then there's outcomes, cab tests, rouse, burst throughs, and pursuit. Once all that is over, then there's shooting. You shoot from any and everybody that can fire, that didn't already fire in a previous phase. And then now there's more cab tests, rouse, burst throughs, and pursuits. Then you go to movement, where you have the option to align again if you want. And then you replace your professional general. He now appears in one of your units. Yeah, and it's in here. I didn't see this in the book, but it's probably in the movement phase section. It does say it takes over as 1 grade lower than its predecessor. Okay, so then you have prompted moves. You move your UGs according to the movement phase right here, playing the properly colored card to get the type of movement that you're looking for. Then you go to the fighting phase, active player, then the alternative. You can opt to align again. You fight the melee, files, and supporting files. If you shove, your next fight has to be an adjacent fight. Shatter is not used in fighting, it's only used in charging. Then the outcomes, again, is cab test, rouse, burst through, and pursuits. Breakoffs, prompt breakoff moves. If you've got a unit that you think is going to lose and needs to get back and out of the way or fall back, you can play this breakoff from enemy. There might cause a cab. Then you got moves while in combat. So you're still in the fighting phase. You've already done the melee combat. Now you want to apply a movement to them. You can do move unengaged bases, so you can widen your frontage, make your frontage more narrow. You can fill in gaps. You can do whatever you need to do. You can actually even create a supporting file if you can extend far enough to the right. You can also turn bases to face in a different direction if you're being flanked. Once that's over, then you go to the end turn phase, active player, then the alternative. You recover. Generals within 4 base widths, you play a card. In combat, you need to play a red card. Out of combat, you can play a yellow card, and you remove wounds. Okay, and then you take all the slowing effects off the table, because I guess they only last that turn that they were placed. Now you would replace your instinctive generals, and they come in 1 grade lower than their predecessor. Sacked camps. So the very last thing, if you got any camps that are, it's basically a unit. A camp is basically a unit that can be combated. But we'll get into that on the end turn phase when it comes to camps. I did want to say one thing. There is the general, the block moves. To do a block move, you got to pay an extra card. Okay, so in the block size, basically if you've got multiple UGs in a block and you just want to move that entire block, you're going to have to pay an extra card. All right, now when it comes to block moves, you just have to play 1 additional card to convert a single UG move to a block move. And you can upgrade either card. It doesn't matter. It just really is a green is all you require. And then the block size is limited by the general quality. So if you are a mediocre general, competent general, talented general, or legendary general, you can move 2, 3, 4, or 5 UG blocks. All right, well, that was playing a turn. That was extremely long, but it was actually kind of quick when I went through the summary. And when you're playing the game, I'm sure everything moves quicker. And, all right, well, in the next video, we're going to jump into chapter 9. Okay, we'll jump into chapter 9. And 9.1 is Command and Generals, which should be fairly easy, and that'll be a video. And then we'll do another video with formations, and then we'll do, which I'll probably include movement in with formations, and then we will basically just as we go add more and more of the rules. All right, well, thank you for coming and checking this out, and I will see you in the next video.